Mic check 1 2. Wyoming PBS. Mic check 1 2.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm joined by State Health Officer Alexia Harrist and Wyoming Business Council CEO Josh Durrell. As I have before, I want to open with some comments on COVID-19. As of today, Wyoming has 2,424 lab-confirmed cases, with an additional 499 probable cases. There are currently 1,937 recoveries among our lab-confirmed cases, leaving us about 460 lab-confirmed cases. On Monday, that number compares favorably to Monday, which was at 600 active cases. So that's very encouraging news. It shows that what Wyoming people are doing is making a difference, and I greatly appreciate it, and I think your neighbors and your family do as well. On Tuesday, we had 28 lab-confirmed cases, and there were 32 new lab-confirmed cases reported today. Monday, sadly, we learned that a Fremont County woman's had passed from COVID-19, bringing our total deaths statewide now to 27 citizens of Wyoming that have passed. She was the 11th member of the Northern Arapaho tribe to die from the virus. We continue to monitor Wyoming's positive case rate, and that is the percentage of tests that come back positive for COVID-19 over the past 14 days. You'll remember that we wanted to move from a sort of cumulative number to a rolling average because that's a little more valuable. That rate is currently 3.2%, up slightly from 2.8 and 2.9. Our statewide COVID-19 dashboard remains unchanged. The categories of new cases and new hospitalizations continue to be listed as concerning. We hope that those start to decline and that we can go back to a green state. As I mentioned, we had hoped really the 1st of July we would be in a much better position, but we are starting to make some improvements. We have 16 hospitalizations reported by our hospitals today. Just to reiterate, we are seeing some positive signs. The number of new cases has declined slightly over the past 14 days, with an average of 37 new lab-confirmed cases per day. We have also seen the number of active cases decline in recent days, and our case numbers are relatively stable. Just over the last couple of days, I've had compliments from Governor Ricketts of Nebraska and Governor Noem and Governor Burgum, both saying, look, your numbers are just looking exceptional. You guys are doing the right things. We've also, I do hope that we continue on this trend and that we can carry this into the fall. Couldn't be more critical at this time when we're thinking about education, getting started, making sure that parents have their kids going back to school and that our work environment really improves. Like most of the country, we continue to see most new cases in the younger age range, 19 to 29-year-olds making up 25% of the positive cases. That is a likely result of transmission at social events, gatherings, and as my friend Doug Ducey in Arizona puts it, you know, one of our biggest concerns is bars. Same with Governor Abbott of Texas. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Harris to speak briefly and provide a short update on surveillance and testing at schools. Dr. Harrist.
Thank you, Governor Gordon. First, I'd like to provide a brief update on testing. The capacity of the Wyoming Public Health Laboratory has grown. We can process 750 samples a day or more with consistent turnaround times. Many samples are sent to commercial labs for testing as well. The turnaround times for those can vary and have been unfortunately slower recently. In some Wyoming hospitals, rapid testing is also available. Our surveillance efforts also continue to grow. Looking for cases proactively allows us to identify potential outbreaks at an earlier point. We have mentioned before our testing program for long-term care facilities, and that is continuing. I believe it has helped us avoid more large facility outbreaks. We are also working with the Department of Corrections on surveillance testing in their facilities. Most people are aware that there is an outbreak connected with the state penitentiary in Rawlins, which currently has 22 cases among inmates and 16 among staff. 3 cases among staff have also been identified at the Torrington facility. We have been working closely with the Department of Corrections, and they are taking all recommended steps to prevent and limit transmission within these facilities. Our wastewater testing work is continuing, and at least 9 communities and groups on board and many more pending. All initial sites have shown some indication of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater. We will be trending this data over time to monitor how this concentration changes and whether it can be used to estimate prevalence in each community. With the calendar turning to the page to August 1st, I know questions about schools are a focus for many Wyoming families. Schools are incredibly important to our communities for many reasons. As a pediatrician, I know that being in schools with other children and with in-person teachers is healthy and helpful for most children. I want children to have that experience as much as possible this year, but we need to make sure our children and teachers are safe. We can all help. We have learned that with COVID-19, we have some powerful tools at our disposal. Using them will help make schools more safe and more available. Here's what we can all do to help. Please stay home when sick, unless you need medical help, keep physically apart, and wear face coverings when that isn't practical. These 3 simple tools are the foundations of our public health orders and of school plans. It does make me sad to know that some of these recommendations, that some people see them as something insidious or more than just using the best tools we have to allow children to go to class and to be safe there. Will there be some cases of COVID-19 among students? Unfortunately, yes. But following our common sense recommendations can help keep the numbers lower and more manageable. It is really important that parents contact their healthcare providers about testing if their child has symptoms that could be COVID-19. This will help make sure we are identifying infections early so children can get the appropriate medical care and so we can limit spread within schools. So what will happen if we identify cases among school students or staff? The short answer is that we will approach this in the same way we have with other infectious and communicable diseases for years, and as we have with cases of COVID-19 during the last several months. Once a positive result is reported, public health officials will contact the person with COVID-19 or their parents to follow up and place the person with COVID-19 in isolation. Public health officials will determine who is considered to be a close contact and needs to be quarantined. We define close contacts as those who had contact with the infected person within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more. Schools will be notified by public health officials of positive results and may be asked for information and details to support the follow-up process. More information about school guidance and what to expect when students test positive can be found on our website. As always, public health officials will make specific recommendations for schools based on each situation. We will want to work with our school partners to make good decisions based on common sense principles, and we want these decisions to be focused on what is best for our children, their families, our teachers, and our communities. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, Dr. Harrist. And I want to thank Gina Gibson of the National Day of Prayer, whose daughter made this mask for me, and it was really nice to have her come in a little bit before to spend a moment of prayer with me. It's nice to know that people are out there and that they are doing the right thing and they are praying. This is a time when our state really needs that. Last week, I had a call with our superintendents of school districts from around the state to hear their concerns and address some of the questions that they had. I did this because it's important that I and the superintendent have conversations with our superintendents and get a sense of how our schools are going to open, what concerns are, what we should be on the lookout for, and how we can respond. And I've always felt it's important to know what's going on with boots on the ground rather than just here in Cheyenne. I want to say I appreciate the input and recognize how challenging it has been to adapt to this new learning environment. I am remarkably impressed about how well Wyoming has adapted to changing circumstances, and our flexibility, I think, no doubt will be challenged as we go forward, but I feel very confident that our schools are in good hands and that we are moving the right way. The Department of Education has received Smart Start reopening plans from all 48 school districts in the state. I want to commend the superintendent for her work there. Those plans are currently being reviewed by the department. Our goal is to create an environment that is as safe as possible, again, as safe as possible for our state students, faculty, and staff. And it's going to be predicated on local conditions, and that's just because we don't see the same situations in all communities around the state, both population-wise and infection rate-wise. Moving on to higher education, though, I do want to point out that this morning I announced the establishment of an adult education grant program, which will provide grants for unemployed and underemployed Wyoming adults to attend UW and community colleges. Over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to be part of graduation ceremonies for both community colleges and UW, and I have been so impressed by the non-traditional students that we have seen and how anxious people are to expand and grow their credentials so that they're much more employable. So this grant program will be funded by CARES Act dollars and administered through an application process. But I think it's an extraordinarily important step that the state can take in making sure that our workforce is ready for new businesses as they come to Wyoming, because we are one of the safest states where you can locate your business. Just yesterday, I was talking with a new candidate business that is thinking about moving his manufacturing business here to Wyoming. That marks one of several conversations I've had about people who are saying, I want to move to Wyoming because this is a great state to do business. We want to provide an opportunity with this grant program for adult workers to obtain those new skills and get the tools they need to advance their careers. This is a benefit to both the workers and to our state, and I look forward to how our community colleges and the university will be able to stand up these programs that'll be very, very effective as we go forward. I'm also anxious to mention that we're working on the final steps of a program to help fund scholarships for just the straightforward students of Wyoming, both at the university and community colleges. I'd looking forward to coming up with an announcement there in the coming days. Yesterday, we opened up funding for 2 additional business relief programs, the Relief Fund and the Mitigation Fund. There has been incredible demand for this funding. I was shocked. I think, Josh, I heard that the first $100 million went out in a matter of something like 8 hours, which provides, so these programs will provide assistance to businesses and nonprofits that have experienced hardships related to the COVID-19 crisis. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Business Council CEO Josh Durrell, who took office in that position about the time COVID did, and I think you're doing better than COVID.
Thanks, Governor Gordon. I am doing better than COVID, and so is my agency, I think. But thank you. My name is Josh Durrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council, and over the past few months, it's been the Business Council's honor to execute the business relief programs that were set forth by the legislature in their mid-May special session. These 3 programs will do a lot to aid Wyoming businesses, and in total will deliver $325 million to our economy. If you look across the entire U.S., our programs represent the largest amounts for business relief. And we've worked with other states to talk with them about how to structure and administer their programs. All of this is to say the governor and our legislature truly care about business in Wyoming and have developed programs that are making a difference in our communities. Let's take a deep dive into each of these programs and talk about specifics and highlights. The first fund that we rolled out was the Interruption Fund, which was intended to be a rapid response program for small businesses. That program served businesses with 50 employees or fewer and got out nearly $100 million to over 4,000 of those businesses during the month of June. This truly impacted the smallest businesses, as $75 million went to companies of 5 employees or less. The collaboration between state agencies is also a big highlight here. The Attorney General's Office, Workforce Services, the Secretary of State's Office, and a big shout out to the State Auditor's Office that has been making and handling all of the payments for these grants and making that information available on wyopen.gov, the state's transparency website. Now let's talk about the Relief Fund and the Mitigation Fund that the governor mentioned earlier. Those launched just yesterday morning, and as he mentioned, it was actually 4 hours that $100 million had been applied for. The Relief Fund offers grants of up to $300,000 for businesses and select nonprofits that have 100 or fewer employees. We worked closely over the last few weeks with nonprofit organizations and a special legislative working group in order to integrate nonprofits into this fund. This fund totals $175 million. And in the first 24 hours, and now it's up to over $130 million. The Mitigation Fund is all about health and safety of employees and customers as organizations try their best to maintain normal operations during this challenging time. The Mitigation Fund supports businesses and nonprofits of any size and offers grants of up to $500,000. You can apply for these funds at wyobizrelief.org. That's wyobizrelief.org, where you can also find resources that will help you understand the calculations, provide answers in our frequently asked questions section, and ways to connect with our customer service team. In addition to our team, we're encouraging businesses to work with their bankers, accountants, chambers of commerce, and Small Business Development Center to make the application process as simple as possible. While nobody wishes for a crisis like this, the Business Council is thankful to be in a position to help people, businesses, and communities during their time of need. We'd like to thank Governor Gordon and our legislature for entrusting us with such a tremendous responsibility. But it isn't just about grant money, and we know that our work is just beginning as we think about how to positively impact the Wyoming economy for years to come. As businesses emerge from this challenge, please make sure to reach out to us, as well as your chambers of commerce, Main Street programs, and Small Business Development Center to get the assistance and training you need to keep moving forward. As we look to the future, we see businesses looking at Wyoming as a safe place to move and expand. Our recruiting efforts have intensified, and I know economic developers around the state are busy showing off their communities and what they have to offer. Let's also shop smart and shop safe. Support your local businesses and explore Wyoming's beauty of its outdoors. If you're a business or nonprofit, please go to that website, wyobizrelief.org, to find out if you're eligible and to apply. If you know a business owner or a nonprofit manager, please encourage them to do so as well. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be available for questions later.
Thanks, Josh. You and your board have really taken this challenge on and have done a remarkable job. So thanks very much for stepping forward. So I wanted to wrap up with a brief discussion of our efforts when it comes to the allocations of CARES Act funds. So as of today, we have allocated more than $710 million of the $1.25 billion in CARES Act dollars that were available to Wyoming. To be clear, there is a delay between when the funds are allocated, they go through the process, and when they're requested in a form of reimbursement or payments are distributed. However, we are working diligently to get that money where it is most needed. And I think, Josh, the efforts that you've gone to and your board are indicative of that. I also want to commend you on coming up with a really elegant process that is not only relatively easy to navigate, certainly also one that is transparent and allows people to see what's going on, as well as I'm just happy to know that you've caught a couple of less than honest applications in the process. Today, we've launched an update to our Wyoming Sense website. I believe it should be online now, and that will show how the CARES Act funds are being distributed. This effort extends my ongoing goal of transparency within this administration. And so between the two sites, the Auditor's Wyopen, where you can see where the money has gone in terms of checks that have been written, et cetera, and the Wyoming Sense.gov, where you can see, and that's Wyoming Sense, SENSE.gov. You can see where that funding is allocated and where it's ready to go. And you can see that list of categories and funding allocations there. The CARES Act funding has included more than $325 million in economic and business relief, $51.5 million for K-12 education, $59 million for higher education, $60 million for an expansion of COVID-19 testing and contact tracing, $36 million to local governments, support for counties on contact tracing and PPE, and we are also in the process of reviewing a final round of applications for providers to build out broadband infrastructure in the most rural parts of Wyoming. We should also see additional details on this $100 million project in the coming days, or possibly next week. The other evening, I had the opportunity to go to a restaurant the other evening, and the proprietor of that establishment, somebody I hadn't met before, came up and said, "Governor Gordon, I just want to tell you, your state is the only one that has really recognized the importance of small business." And Josh, again, a commendment to you, the fact that you built a program that affects the very smallest businesses and is accessible and easy to go to. I just want to thank you for that. I do want to make sure for ag producers that they know that we are carrying sufficient CARES Act funds so that this month, next month, and in October, early part of November, we'll have the chance to be able to calibrate how the CARES Act funding can go to address some of the challenges you've seen. I note that there's about $3.2 million, I believe, Josh, that has already gone out to ag producers. Any assistance provided to our agricultural producers, I want to mention, is not intended to address the impacts being felt currently by drought conditions. Drought conditions were not brought on by COVID and so are not eligible for CARES. However, we are working with counties across the state to make sure that we have the appropriate designations in place. We want to make sure that folks are getting help. And if you look on the Wyoming drought, or if you look on the nation's drought map, you'll see that Wyoming is indeed, again, challenged with droughts. The challenges to our state's economy remain significant. We've had bits of news that have just not been good. Yesterday, the last operating gas rig in the state was laid down, leaving us with no active rigs. And this is only the second time since 1884 that this has happened. I hate the word unprecedented. It keeps coming up. There are many jobs connected with these rigs, and the impact in their absence has on Wyoming revenues is enormous. I'm happy that the Minerals Committee is looking at ways to help incentivize, just as we are with the Oil and Gas Commission, ways that we can do a better job of keeping these businesses afloat. And that goes especially for coal as well, where we continue to work to make sure we have carbon capture and sequestration. So that wraps up my comments today. Again, I just want to leave you with a thank you for taking this situation seriously, for doing your best as a citizen, as I knew you would, for remembering the responsibility we all bear to one another. This is what Gina came to pray with me about today. I do think that Wyoming is indeed cautiously on the right track. I look forward to us going back to school, and with that, I stand for any questions. And I have a few that have been submitted from my good friend Kristen Saban at the Sheridan Press. Kristen, it was good to see you moderating the debates the other day. She asked, given the high demand for interruption funds and now the relief and mitigation funds set up with the CARES Act money, do I anticipate any additional programs that will be put in place to help businesses survive the sharp, fast decline in revenues due to COVID and its impact on the economy? Kristen, I will let, if Josh wants to, I can let Josh talk a little bit to that. There's a lot of flexibility that's built into one of the three bills. And so with the ag program, for example, I am looking at being able to stand up a different program. I do want to note, though, that we are drawing close to the full allocation of our CARES Act funding. And so we really need to be mindful about how each of these last dollars is spent. There are a lot of projects that are coming in front of the SLIB board this next, I guess tomorrow, looking at those carefully and want to make sure that we do a good job getting those dollars out. It's not a rapid race to get these dollars just out the door so we can get them out the door. The fact of the matter is these have been deployed very well in a thoughtful way and in an expeditious way. So in terms of people starting to plan for the future, in our business, ranching, and our movie theater business, we're now thinking about what January, February, March, April, May bring. Josh, anything you want to add to the conversation?
Well, obviously on a grand scale, I think you covered it really well. The current programs that we have, I think we're really interested in making sure that those get executed properly and that we do expend all of those funds. But the addition of broadband, I think, is something that, while it is not directly to businesses that may be hurting, it is going to impact businesses in those smaller communities, and having access to broadband is a huge thing. I also think that really, in some ways, you could look at this $1.25 billion as helping our economy and businesses throughout the state, no matter what, because if it's spent in the state, it's going to get passed from hand to hand and so on and so forth, and help businesses. As the governor mentioned, I think looking at these businesses that are not fully impacted yet but will be, and rolling out another program in the future is also going to make a big difference. But at the Business Council, we're looking too at what programs do businesses need in terms of education. How can we help make sure that people have the knowledge and the information that they need to move their businesses forward after this funding goes away? So thank you. Good question.
Thanks, Josh. From Joy Ufford of the Sublet Examiner, Pinedale Roundup. Can CARES funding be used to prop up the state's social services and mental health budgets? Some Wyomingites feel they and other vulnerable folks are being left behind. There has been $1 million in CARES Act funding deployed to the Department of Family Services to assist in covering mental health and substance abuse treatment for families in the system. This is to sort of help address the challenges that people may have if they lack insurance. We continue to work on ways that we can get monies deployed for mental health and other substance abuse and care kinds of treatments, and we'll continue to evaluate that as we go forward and deploy those funds in a way that makes sense. Dr. Harrist, is there any additional comment on that matter? Well, thanks for that. And then from Greg Johnson of the Gillette News Record, Peabody Energy announced today it has marked down the valuation of the North Antelope Rochelle mine by $1.42 billion, and both Peabody and Arch Resources are reporting significant second quarter losses. Today's second quarter Peabody earnings report also shows that coal only accounted for 17% of the nation's power generation in the second quarter of this year. How concerned are you that the state's efforts to diversify away from dependence on energy revenues seems to be years or even decades behind this decline? I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking backwards. Wyoming has a future to address and to aggressively meet. It is concerning what we're seeing happen to coal. Actually, the 17% number that you have is a little different from the 14% number that I had. Coal continues to be heavily pressured, and it's not a surprise. It's a great disappointment, but not a surprise that we've seen the write-downs. It is, just to put this in perspective, we also saw Rosen, Mountain States Lamb Cooperative, go down the other day, leaving only one lamb buyer. That lamb buyer is truly a monopoly on Western lamb, not just Wyoming, but Western lamb. And that seemed to go unnoticed. And yet 14%, and only a portion of that 14%, caught the ire of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they said, look, that's going to make a big difference in electric pricing, so we aren't going to allow Arch and Peabody to combine in a joint venture. There's something wrong in this country when we set up monopolies that affect our producers, and at the same time we take businesses that are so essential, and only a percentage of their generating capacity is somehow tagged as a way to affect consumer prices for electricity. This is a challenge for the state. We need to address it straightforwardly. Coal does have a future. We're working heavily across a wide range of fronts on carbon capture and sequestration. If you want to electrify roads and put electric cars on those roads, you're going to have to generate electricity. You're going to have to put a lot of infrastructure in, and you're going to have to figure out some way to pay for those roads. So this conversation about how our energy future looks and what the mix is going to be has got to get a lot more sophisticated than fossil bad, green good, because we just have a nation to run and an economy to build, and Wyoming is in the center of that, and an all energy sources future is what we really want to emphasize. So thanks for that, Greg. And with that, I guess I can open up to questions from the phones or from Tom.
This is on? Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the $710 million allocated for CARES Act funding so far, and I just wanted for clarification. Does that figure include the scholarship program that you mentioned earlier that's still being potentially stood up for UW and community colleges? Or, yeah, I just want to be clear on that.
Tom, thanks on the number that I gave out, the $700 million. It does include the adult scholarship program we announced the other day. It does not include what I anticipate we'll be able to do for community colleges and for the university in the coming days. Thank you.
And one follow-up. I know that it's a similar proposal, or Speaker Harshman had a proposal last week that was advanced out of a task force that was about $115 million for such a program. And so I was wondering, are you looking at a similar level, or what are your discussions looking like right now for that?
Tom, good question. We're kind of trying to figure out what fits within that CARES Act guidance as best it can, which is really where we're working. And I know, and Tom, I just want to point this out. There's a strong sentiment that says, "Damn the torpedoes, let's just get this spent." Because what happens if we have an audit? Who cares? That's for future generations. As the chief executive, I don't feel that I can bind future executive branches or the state, for that matter, because of carelessness on our part. We can do this, we can do it right, and we can do it expeditiously, and we can do it in a way that my grandson won't have to pay it back. And if anybody doubts the way I'm looking at this, if we get audited and they decide to claw back, they being the federal government decides to claw back those dollars, they will do that by garnishing our mineral royalty grants, by garnishing our PILT payments, by garnishing the federal funds that come our way. They'll get their pound of flesh. We don't have that chance. And so when I look at this, I look at it as possible debt that the state will have to take on. And I hate debt. Thanks.
Governor, Angus Thurmer from Wildfire.
Hi, Angus.
What did the superintendents, what were they worrying about when you talked to them during this last week?
Angus, thanks for that question. I don't know as I would say it was much of a conversation about worries. I think there is some concern about what happens under different scenarios. How's the state going to react? I just wanted to open the conversation with the superintendents, make sure they knew they could call me directly if things were starting to show up. No matter how well planned we are, I think as we go into this school year, there will be hiccups. Dr. Harrist has done a phenomenal job of outlining various ways that schools and classrooms can respond. It's important that we understand every school district is a little bit different. And so I would say it was a little bit of a concern about what's going to happen with funding, a little bit of a concern about what happens under different scenarios with CARES, but mostly just a conversation about what can we do as a state to assist the superintendents in this delicate task of reopening the schools. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Harris, never mind. Sorry. Next question.
Hi, Governor. Jim O'Reilly from Bigfoot 99 Radio.
Hi, Jim.
A question for you and possibly Dr. Harris. Teton County has received a lot of statewide attention recently for its countywide face mask ban. However, a Board of County Commissioners of a county in the opposite corner of Wyoming this week unanimously passed a resolution encouraging the public to make virus-related healthcare decisions for themselves and their families on an appropriate basis, and to refrain from any county-wide virus-related mandates concerning individual healthcare decisions. My understanding is that the officials of Goshen County want to start a conversation that if Teton County can pass an orders approved by the state for face masks and closures even, and counties with low virus impacts should be able to open with no orders at all from the state. What are your thoughts on that unanimously passed resolution in Goshen County, generally speaking, and especially as a way to possibly look toward reopening the state in a stepwise fashion in the coming months?
Well, Jim, thanks for that question. I think it points out the tremendous variety of conditions on the ground that you find throughout Wyoming. You know, with Goshen's resolution, I appreciate the intent. You know, the one piece to that resolution that I think is missing is they talk a lot about making your own decisions. That's great. I think we all need to make those decisions, but we need to know that the decisions that we're making also can affect what happens to our neighbors and our friends. One of the Uinta case, there was an individual that didn't feel well, went in to get tested, went from the test to a bar, and we suddenly had a huge surge of cases out of Uinta County. So this is the kind of careless behavior that we really have said Wyoming citizens, for the most part, aren't going to do that. And you know, it's unfortunate that we've raised all these issues. From the start, we have worked as a state to say, what are the conditions on the ground? We'll try to set a minimum standard. What are the conditions we see on the ground? How does that condition get informed by the local health officer? So in the case of Goshen County, one of the reasons why we were able to reduce those orders was because Goshen County and Niobrara County and Weston and Crook were saying, look, we don't have the same situation that's happening over in other parts of the state. Made sense. So we took their advice, just as we'll consider taking their advice here. But there are residents. I used to serve on the Volunteers of America board, and we had a housing project there in Torrington, Bell Park Towers, that has a lot of senior citizens in it. And I don't, you know, this is where I get a little bit angry if people are saying, oh, those people that are in Bell Park Towers need to die, so we're just going to go around without our masks on so that maybe they get infected and then we'll have more real estate. That's just really an unfortunate set of circumstances. All we have to do is act responsibly, make the choices that are the right choices to make. Right in Torrington, on one of the churches, is a sign that says, freedom is the right to be wrong, but not the right to do wrong. And so it's important that we understand what's going on, and that we take the advice that is given, and that we, I guess, respect our neighbors and do the right thing. Thanks, Jim. Dr. Harrist, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Governor. You know, I'll just add that we do have confidence in our recommendations, as well as the need for the current public health orders. The evidence and the data do tell us that the measures that are in them are what is needed to slow transmission and to help schools and businesses stay open. We have, of course, seen situations where low burden places become high burden places in a relatively quick amount of time. That being said, there is a way in the orders to request countywide variances, and I am happy to consider any variances that come through, you know, in the context of the specific data for that location and you know, and the specific data of the outbreak.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Governor Gordon. This is Camille Erickson at the Casper Star Tribune.
Hi, Camille.
I wanted to take a moment to extend on Greg's question related to the drop in the oil and gas rig count yesterday that we saw, as well as, of course, the write-down of NARM. And I wanted to ask, we received quite a bit of response from energy workers who are now out of work. And so I wanted to ask if you could provide some immediate resources that are available for folks, especially those in the energy industry, who are facing joblessness right now. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you. Director Cooley has been working on this with Workforce Services for some time. We're trying to make sure that we can set up job fairs and all the things that really are important for a worker who's out of work, as well as to provide unemployment. Part of our funding has gone to extend unemployment benefits and workers' compensation as well, so that we can lower the costs of doing business in Wyoming and hopefully keep a number of our folks employed. I am hopeful. I've had conversations with several of the operators that they are looking to start to re-up their drilling again relatively soon. Relatively couldn't come quickly enough, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that that important segment of our industry continues to go forward. And you know, here's another example of how important it is that people do the right thing. We have seen Arizona open up and Texas open up and Florida open up and California open up, only to have to be rolled back again on their economic activity. That slows down the consumption of fossil fuels, that slows down transportation, slows down electricity, et cetera. We need our country to be open. We need it to be working. We need it to be progressing forward. These are challenging times, and so much of Wyoming's economy is based on what happens outside of our state boundaries. If we don't have good oil prices, it's very hard for people to see their way clear to start a drilling program here in Wyoming. Last week I did talk about it's good to see that some of our wells continue production. The numbers have been marginally up because we didn't see the shut-in that we expected to see. And I do hope that as our economy starts to recover, that we'll see those prices come up. When we look at coal, we've worked very hard with the Department of Energy and the Department of the Department of Energy and some of the sections in there to try to make sure that Wyoming can extend its leadership position. We're really in a race with North Dakota in this to make sure that people understand that carbon dioxide, whether it's generated by coal, whether it's generated by cars, whether it's generated by just general activity, we need to be able to capture it, to extract it out of our atmosphere, to address the very big challenges that we see in climate. We don't see that renewable energy by itself will do anything that slow down the amount of carbon dioxide that's being released. It won't take it out of the atmosphere. That's a crucial race that Wyoming is engaged in to make sure that we start to redress this climate issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and I would say, too, at the end, that's part of what this adult education program is, so that the folks in the community college area like Gillette, Rock Springs, that they can get access to get more education to become more employable by other industries. Thanks.
Hey, Governor Gordon, this is Seth of the Star Tribune.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, this is kind of piggybacking on Jim O'Reilly's question. I know you've spoken to some of the criticism about constitutionality, but I spoke with the head of the Goshen County Commission earlier today, and he had some sort of pointed remarks about that, so I wanted to give you a chance to respond. And Dr. Harris, he sort of reiterated a lot of those criticisms and felt that the Department of Health in particular had, sort of trampled and overreached, and I wonder your response to that. When I say trampled, I'm sorry, I mean on constitutional rights and the rights of people in Goshen County.
Yeah, and I don't see it that way. I certainly understand his point of view. I hear that point of view a lot. When I look at what's happened in other states, and I have Governor Ducey of Arizona say, he used an expletive, this is really a scary thing. Goshen County's been relatively lucky, and God bless them for that. This is a virus that when you're successful, hopefully people remember when you're successful, it's going to seem like you overreached. Goshen County's been relatively lucky, but we know that things can happen. We hope they don't happen. They have certainly happened elsewhere, and when we get too casual and too lax, then we end up with the situation that we saw in Arizona, and that we saw in California, and that we saw in Texas, where people had to roll back those openings. We are not interested in rolling back any of these because it's important our businesses keep going forward. And I appreciate their comments. I respect the point of view that they come from. I have been a staunch and will continue to be a staunch advocate of the Constitution, and everything we've done has been strictly constitutional. Dr. Harrist, any comments you have?
Thanks, Governor. I'll just simply add that we, of course, have been working closely with the Attorney General's office on all of the public health orders that we've thought necessary for the state of Wyoming. It is my duty as the state health officer to protect the public health, and I'm just trying to do the right thing to help protect people.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Seth. Next question. Any more questions? Well,
Hi, Governor Gordon.
yes.
Hi,
Is that Barbara?
It's Barbara Ann. Sorry to get there. How are you, sir?
Hi, Barbara Ann.
I have a quick question for you that we don't believe that you've talked today, but I'm wondering if you had heard back at all from Sonny Perdue on the letter that you had sent expressing your displeasure on what they were doing with the lamb and sheep.
How are you?
So thanks, Barbara Ann. The Department of Justice did put a stay on the sheep, on the lamb co-op. It's a little bit unclear where we go from here. I think you heard in my comments earlier today, it puts our wool growers really in harm's way. The only remaining lamb buyer that really buys that kind of volume of lambs, kills that kind of volume of lambs, really now has a monopoly, and they also have ways to import lamb. And so when we look at our competition, it's really frustrating. If you go anywhere in this country, people always want New Zealand lamb, and yet it is domestic lamb that is really the best that we can produce. We'll continue to be on top of that. I have talked to the Attorney General on a regular basis to find any way that we can be part of that discussion and make sure that we support the Mountain States Lamb Co-op as best we can. Thank you, Barbara Ann. So with that, again, thank you. Some fairly positive information today. The numbers of cases dropped. Infection rate did go up, but I think we're stabilizing. We feel good about that. It couldn't be at a more important time. Personally, I'm really thrilled that we've had county fairs go off pretty much without a hitch, and that was one of the concerns that we had. I've been to a number of rodeos, and I've enjoyed seeing people doing what we do in Wyoming. I had a friend in Buffalo the other day who was saying, Governor, you're really in a sort of difficult spot because folks come in from the ranch, they go to the feed store, they buy their feed, there's some people there, they start talking about how the governor closed everything down. And then they go over to the parts store, same story, and then they go to the grocery store and buy all the stuff they want, and then they drive home. The fact of the matter is they went to 3 open businesses while it's there. So when I hear from our neighboring states like Nebraska or South Dakota or North Dakota or Idaho, that you guys are doing it right, you're staying open, your businesses are getting more robust. It's a little hard. I mean, I appreciate the frustration we all have with our circumstances, but if I had to choose a place to be with the numbers that we have, it would be Wyoming. I just had a friend who also called the other day from Hawaii, where they're locked in their houses, can't go anywhere between the islands. You can't go from Oahu to the big island of Hawaii, that sort of thing. Wyoming, you can still travel. You can still see the beauty of our country. If you're a business, you still have the opportunity to build a new business. And people are looking to Wyoming because they know we know how to do it right. So God bless you. Thanks very much. And make it a good week. Thanks.